My brain's going, you're going to get all these rewards. I'm going to feel good. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to meet people. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to laugh. All these things that really weren't happening anymore. And to override that is extraordinarily difficult. The upside to it is we can rewire our brains. We know that. We can lay down new tracks.
If you've ever struggled with addiction or know someone who has, then do we have the We're the Luckiest show for you. Today I'll be talking with Laura McKowen about why everything we think we know about addiction is wrong and the surprising magic of living a sober life. So welcome to the show, Laura. Are you ready to shine?
I am ready. That was great.
When did you first realize that you had an addiction challenge?
We do all kinds of things to soften the edges, to take the edge off. Food, technology, our phones. I mean, how many times a day do you pick up your phone when you're bored? Or I'll speak for myself. It's like a lot. So I realized that was my go-to thing. And even just the idea that I could do it, that I could have a glass of wine later was a relief. And then when that was taken away, or when I knew I couldn't or shouldn't because I was pregnant, I felt like, it was uncomfortable.
Take me to your mom's 60th birthday, if you could. What happened?
The night before the party, I decided that I wanted to have a little party of my own. And I was drinking and hiding it from everybody, not very well. And so I not only woke up the next day extraordinarily hungover, but my family knew that I had been drinking. And at this point, no one was cool with that anymore. It was like, I had been very vague about how I was doing, and everyone kind of knew I was working towards sobriety, but I don't think anyone knew that I was still in that much trouble. And so the night of her birthday party, the day of her birthday party was excruciating. I had such anxiety. I had done it again. Like I had been in that state hundreds, maybe even thousands of times, regretting the night before, so ashamed, so embarrassed that I did it again. And quite honestly, terrified that I couldn't seem to get this thing. And we did this party, and it was later in the night. I managed to stay sober that night. It was later on in the night, and I kind of just needed to breathe. So I went outside to my car, and I was just crying in my car and sort of listening to music. And I looked up and saw my brother had come out of the restaurant where we were having the party and was looking around. I knew right when I saw him that he was looking for me. And so I got out of the car, and he was a little mad, I think because he was so worried and, upset. He thought that he thought that I'd gone off to like drink in the car, which was embarrassing and humiliating. I'm his older sister, and like, this is like the things that this is what's happening in my life right now. My little brother is coming out because he's worried that I've run off to go drinking. It was just this very embarrassing moment. And he was like, there's a party going on inside. What are you doing? And I said, I just needed to breathe. And we had this conversation on the right in front of the restaurant that night that really sort of changed things for me in a way, because in that conversation, I did something that I didn't do something that I had been doing for a really long time, was try to explain away what was going on, offer all these excuses and try to get his sympathies. It was more like I just said, this is my thing. Like, this is mine. I have to do this.
There's something powerful about saying, this is my thing. You're saying, I take ownership of it. And once you take ownership of it, my guess is you're no longer the victim of it, at least not to the level you were before.
That's right. Right. I, up until that point, had been using a lot of excuses and just sort of not really, like you said, 100% owning it, and that this was mine. And yeah, it was hard. And yeah, it was unfair. And all of those things were true. And yet it was still mine. Right. So that was the that I didn't drink again after that. I didn't realize that would be the end of it either. And I think that's an interesting aspect is I stopped saying I'm never going to drink again. I just said like, I'm only going to just not drink today. And that's all I can promise.
Well, that's huge. If we're talking about things about addiction that we have all wrong, there's this concept of committing to forever. That when I coach somebody, I never talk about getting up the mountain. I talk about micro habits. Because if we do something massive, there's no stick.
Right. Right. And it's also, we can't wrap our minds around that. That's not even how anything works, right? We don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. Mm-hmm. We really only can do what we're doing right now. I can have this conversation with you. That's about all I can do is manage the next words that are going to come out of my mouth. And that's particularly helpful when you're facing something that's really painful, because I think the thing happening is painful enough, but then our minds go, it's always going to be this way. And that is devastating, right? Even though it's not logically true, like we feel our fear is that it will never change. But if I said, I'm just not going to drink right now and I'm not going to do it today, that was manageable. I could do that. And I also said all the time to myself, look, if you want to drink tomorrow, we'll do that. You can decide that tomorrow. Today, we're not going to do that. I was the kind of person who was like, okay, how do you want me to be? Oh, you want me to be confident? Okay, I'll just be confident. You want me to say this because that's the right thing to say? Okay, I'll just say that. You want me to like yes you to death? Even though I say I'm inside, I'm saying, no, that's not what I want. So I had to be really honest, even if it disappointed people, even if it wasn't what they wanted to hear, even if it was inconvenient and whatever. And to me, it was like, I don't want this. Like, look, I don't want to get sober. I want to try. I don't want to keep going as I have. Yeah. But I also don't want to get sober. And I'm tired of pretending to want this thing that I really don't want. But I'm going to do it anyway because the alternative is unthinkable. And that was the honest place. So I questioned it. I was like, how do I know this is going to be better? Honestly, I think this is going to be terrible. Like I can't see how it's going to be good. And that's just what was true. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I'm pissed off. I'm sad. It took me like over a year to say those things out loud instead of just pretending that I was fine. Because addiction also doesn't make sense to the outside world. It's like, how can you want to keep doing this thing that's like actively so clearly destroying your life? How? And so a lot of it is just pushing some of that out and going, what is true in my experience right now? And there's something very powerful. And this is, I think, why automatic writing is powerful, is if you can just be honest on the page, something very alchemical happens there. It's like there's a resonance. Like we know what the truth feels like. We know what it feels like. And it allows things to expand and breathe. Whereas constantly sort of manipulating it or sidestepping the truth just makes things smaller and smaller and smaller.
You have a friend who I think maybe she even texted you this. You were really struggling with staying sober. And it was the concept of, I've drank how many times to get myself into a certain brain state. There is a neurological groove in the record. What's going on there?
Yeah. So there was this moment where I was literally on a train and also on a metaphorical train of I'm about to drink. Mm-hmm. And I had a wine bottle in between my legs. I was heading into the city to go to a party, and I had a used Starbucks coffee cup that I was going to pour the wine into. And
I got to say, this is a miracle. To me, this is an absolute miracle. I don't know if you would call it that. Absolute miracle.
No, it's a total miracle. And I even say that in the book, like it was an actual medical miracle because what I know now about what was going on in my brain as a brain process, it's almost impossible to override. When you are in addiction, acute addiction, especially, your brain associates and fires off the neurochemistry to get you to seek out that substance as if it was food, water, shelter. It is on that level of need as far as your brain is concerned. So to override that is a miracle. I agree. I didn't end up drinking on that. I was about 30 days sober. I didn't end up drinking on that train. And I did a thing that had been suggested for me to do for a long time, which was to text someone before you drink, right? Texted a friend, and it was literally like a matter of seconds that saved me. But I was like, okay, I'm going to text her. If she texts me back, I won't drink. She texts me right back. Tried this meditation where I paused for 12 minutes. And then I did the meditation again. And before I knew it, I was in the city about to get off the train, and I threw that wine and I took the train back home. And
with some Sbarro's pizza in the middle.
With some, pizza that I went and got 2 pieces of pizza that I never ate. But when I got home, I was like very shell shocked, because I knew I had just escaped that moment by a hair's breadth. I knew that and I knew like the possibility of what could have happened. I don't know. That could have been a night that I died. Who knows? Anything could happen at that point. So I was like, I need to understand what happened. Why, and yes, it was a friend the next morning who was like, your brain was hijacked, right? And I was like, yeah. She's like, no, really, your brain is hijacked. And what she meant was, when we drink or use drugs, it extraordinarily messes up the pleasure process of our brain. So we get this massive dopamine spike. And then because our brains, our bodies are always seeking balance. Over the years, what my body had done was try to counteract this dopamine spike by I don't want to make it too complicated, but over time, I'm getting less and less dopamine from this stimulus.
Which is why people typically need more and more and more to actually get the same.
My dopamine levels overall are becoming lower and lower and lower.
Which means you're feeling crappier and crappier and crappier.
That's right. Like, you need dopamine to live. It's what makes us feel motivated to do things. It's not just, it's known as like the pleasure thing, but it's more than that. It's like, you need it. If you have very low dopamine, you're not getting out of bed.
Yeah.
You're not brushing your teeth. You're not caring about much of anything. But the tricky thing is, long after you're not actually getting the pleasure, the feelings of pleasure, the high from using something, your brain still, once it gets triggered that this thing is going to happen. So, for example, in this case, when I got the invitation to the party, my brain was already on the train, like, we're going to drink, and getting like the desire had kicked in, even though I hadn't been getting any pleasure from drinking for a very long time. So to override that is really hard, because there's deep grooves worn into the brain. Like, this happens, and it all starts with drinking, right?
And by that, this happens, you're saying all the positive experiences happen, all the cool things happen,
I'm going to feel good, I'm going to talk
times.
to people, I'm going to meet people, I'm going to have fun, I'm going to laugh, I'm going to all these things that really weren't happening anymore, So my brain's going, you're going to get all these rewards, and to override that is extraordinarily difficult. And the plus side, the upside to it, is we can rewire our brains. We know that we can lay down new tracks, so to speak, so that when I get an invitation for a party now, I don't even think about drinking, or that even if it is a party where alcohol, it's like, oh, that could be fun because people might be there, or do I want, it's like, I don't go there. But it's been 5 years. Like, that took literal years of rewiring to do, but it does happen. I don't have to consider where I'm going anymore, who I'm going to be around, and whether or not drinking is a danger for me.
For a while, it took, though, going back to the environment, actually making your choices very carefully, because I've got this history here, I've got that history there, and you had to be extra cognizant and aware. And from a spiritual perspective, if we want to talk mindfulness, you had to be incredibly present.
I did, and I had to be honest and realistic about, because look, When at first I wanted just sobriety to be this thing I was doing in the background, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to carry on with my life and not lose any friends and not lose any face with people and just sort of get sober in the background. And well,
Yeah.
that didn't work. So yes, part of what happened after, and my whole point in that chapter of the book of Stop Getting on the Train was like, these are all the things that are like getting you on that train. And it is a whole long list of things and lots of little sneaky things that we do. So like one big one for people, no matter what you're doing, is like being really clear with others in your life about what you're up to. Like I wouldn't tell people what I was, I stopped going places. If people didn't know I was sober, I wouldn't go. Like that's one tiny example, because we always want a little excuse to do the thing that we want to do in the background, So yes, I had to be extraordinarily mindful. Like, is this going to be difficult? Is this going to cause me anxiety? Is this going to cause me to want to drink? If it does, I'm just going to keep it away for now because I want to give myself a shot.
Awesome. So speaking of giving yourself a shot, your friend Casey, you would call an interrupter. What is both a person as an interrupter and maybe a technique you can share with us? Because what you're talking about, so I did bicycle racing in Europe for a while, a long time ago. And what I learned is that the critical decisions in a race happened in a fraction of a second. They weren't actually over an hour. It was one single decision. Do I chase this guy down? Do I not? Do I go now? Do I wait? If we can make it past those moments, we've got a fighting chance.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. These are the people, interrupters are people who can hold your vision of what you want and what's possible for you when you can't, right? And are going to check in with you and interrupt your tendencies, because we all have them. Like when we go to make changes, it's very circuitous. Like it's never linear, right? So we do really well for a while, and then maybe we have a setback, and we have another. So those interrupters kind of keep us on the track, so to speak. That's as a person. And then as a process, I mean, when you were talking about the bicycle racing and the fraction of a moment, I would say the equivalent in my experience is whether you say yes or no to something. Yes, I'm going to, and mostly around how you're going to spend your time. Yes, I'm going to go do that versus no, I'm not going to do that. And it's really about this, like having a boundary, and exercising that boundary. And for example, that party that I agreed to go to, where I went on the train, I never said yes to another party like that again after that night. That was a fraction of a moment. You get the invite and you go, nope. And then the decision is made. It's over. Instead, when I got that invite, I hemmed and hawed and had like all these mental gymnastics for 2 weeks, like suffered for 2 weeks, just going, maybe, do it. Do I want to? Yes, no, yes, no. Those fraction of a moment where you just go, nope, and it's over.
I don't know if it started early on or if it came from your mom's 60th party, but there was a decision that was already made. And so if you go based on that, you get the invitation, you're like, hell no. But then the mind kicks in for the dopamine rush. Mm-hmm. And now you're in the argument. But if you went with that initial inner wisdom, you're almost good to go.
That, I think, is right on. I think that's what's true is, you have this knowing, your first response, right, is like, nope. And then if you stay with that, mm-hmm. I can implicitly rely on that intuition now. That connection is very clear. So when something comes up and it's a yes or no, I believe whatever comes up first, right? Yeah. When we exercise using that voice, it's almost like it cheers in the background, like, thank you. I'm going to speak louder next time,
I think that's part of why in your clinics and your retreats, you teach everybody, you say, everybody, you've got to do automatic writing, you've got to do morning pages, you've got to do something so we can start to cultivate that inner wisdom that you've been squashing down for so long.
Totally. I say to all of my students, like, your job, what I consider my job is to keep the connection. I say God, but it can be your, inner truest self, whatever, to keep that connection clear. That is my job. Keep it clear and clean as possible.
Well, that's interesting because I have a lot of coaching clients that I work with that I've never actually pushed a single one to it, but we have a drinking problem as a culture. And it doesn't have to be full-blown alcoholism, whatever we want to define it. We get fuzzy. We lose that connection. Well, I just have one or two drinks. Going back full circle to take the edge off. And we lose that connection to God, source, universe. I joke and say the giant cheeseburger in the sky. Because we're kind of numbed up to everything. Or in the States now where pot, like here in Colorado, Massachusetts, where it's legal, all of a sudden we find ourselves disconnected.
Yeah. And what's funny is I knew that, like, I didn't have the words for it exactly, but I felt that disconnection. Like, there were many consequences to my drinking, outward consequences. I had DUIs, I had car crashes, I had all kinds of messes. But that internal disconnection was the most painful of all. And I felt it, like I would feel it when it was happening. It was like, I'm disconnecting from like my basic goodness, and not good as in like, good girl, bad girl. It's like from God. Like, that's how I feel about it, is like disconnecting me from who I am.
And the question becomes, and I don't think I haven't heard anybody discuss this. I haven't gone that far down the addiction rabbit hole, but to talk about reconnecting with that inner goodness or inner wisdom, or asking specifically, in this moment, I'm shaking, I feel like I need a drink. What would love do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I talk about it a lot, well, there's two ways I want to answer that. One is, if you are really shaking, you don't, like, if someone's listening and they have been drinking, significantly or consistently for a while, you can't just stop drinking. Like, please don't ever do that. You can actually die. So I always want to say that if it comes up, because not many people realize that you can die. So you should never just stop cold turkey without having help from a doctor. That said, one of the big turnaround points for me was reading this book. It's a book I have right here, actually. It's The Great Work of Your Life by Stephen Cope. And in it, there's this quote by the Gospel of Thomas. It says, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. And if you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And for me, that was like, speaks to what we're saying right now. It's like this unused potential in you, or this possibility, this light, as Marianne Williamson said, is not, like, not using it, not connecting with it is not a benign thing. Like, what grows in its place is this darkness and this bitterness and this depression. And I was feeling that. Like, that was almost, that spiritual pain was almost bigger than any of the other pain I was feeling as a result of my drinking. And it was absolutely true, by the way, also.
And dovetailing along this lines, this is more of a spiritual sense, but it actually fits into people connecting with you, I'm guessing, as well. And I'm not big on quoting scripture, but I'm going to go for it anyway. Luke 1:31.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's the only piece of the Bible that I quoted in my book, and I'm not a big Bible person either, but this, it's from the parable of the lost son. And the piece of scripture is, you are always with me and everything I have is yours. And to me, what that story means and what those words mean are, the game that most of us think that we're playing is not the game we're playing, right? as Mary Oliver said, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk through the desert for 1,000 miles repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. And for me, someone who had really gone so out of integrity with myself and really made so many mistakes, to hear that you are always with me and everything I have is yours. You can't, there's nothing that counts you out, right? That's what that meant to me. Those are about the best words and the best sentiment that I could feel. And it's really, I would say, at the crux of what I want people to take from my book too. Like, look, there's nothing that counts you out. Nothing.
This gets to, and we're going to kind of jump around because I want to come back to the pregnancy principle in a minute because I love this. Mm. But there's a whole section in the book about lying. Mm-hmm. But really, it's not so much about lying to others. It's lying to yourself.
That was probably the biggest sort of piece of work that I had to do and still have to do in sobriety. Some would call that emotional sobriety, but in my work with the sponsor, realized by doing the steps that there was this pattern in me mm-hmm. with relationships. My relationships that were difficult, they all had this fundamental dishonesty on my part. And I was so surprised to see that, because it wasn't that I was outright lying to deceive people. We get that form of honesty, but we don't necessarily get the more subtle, socially acceptable forms of honesty, like people pleasing, right? Keeping the peace. We don't really see that as dishonest, but it is. It's dishonest to ourselves because we're not telling the truth about what we want, how we feel, and so we're just operating like left of center all the time, and you're deceiving people and you're deceiving yourself, which is extraordinarily painful. So in that chapter, what I talked about was, like, first of all, that I saw this pattern, and it was pretty devastating to see. But then it was like, oh, similar to what we said before about, like, when I acknowledged that alcohol was my thing, yeah, it was difficult, but then I owned it and I took the power back, right? Yeah. So my relationships that were painful for me, I often felt powerless in them to change them.
Yeah.
And this meant that, no, it was my response. I could see my part anyway. That's a life changer, like, oh, I can change this in me and operate differently, and thus maybe can have different relationships that don't cause me so much difficulty. Amazing. And a lot of us do that. A lot of us do the people pleasing thing. I see a lot of women, especially, like, trying to keep the peace and people pleasing, thinking that it's just a noble thing to do. And once you frame it as like, no, that's actually dishonest, it's like, oh, maybe I want to change that.
Well, it's interesting because if we're people pleasing, and yes, I've seen it particularly more women than men because of this culture, is right. You're dying one breath at a time. You're giving away here, have a soul fragment, have another piece of my soul, have another piece. Of course, I'm going to go to a drink because right now I feel bereft. I feel dead. I'm not living my life. I'm not being my authentic self.
Yeah, what's that quote? I don't know who said it, but it's, if we lie to keep the peace, we start a war within ourselves.
I'll add to that quote one of my own. Insanity is two taskmasters. When you're trying to please somebody else and trying to please yourself at a time, you're being drawn and quartered. You're going to be yanked apart from within.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think it was Freud, maybe, or Jung, said a split mind is hell. Same thing. Like yes. When you're wanting to say yes and no at the same time, that is hell. Yeah. So that's what I was experiencing in that first year where I was trying to get sober and also not wanting to be sober. I had one foot in and one foot out, and I called it purgatory. It is hell.
Wile E. Coyote, like you describe in the book.
Yeah, Wile E. Coyote. Yeah.
Both sides of the canyon at the same time, and it ain't going to last.
It ain't gonna last. No.
So tell us, what's the pregnancy principle? And I wonder, I can help walk us through these 4 points because I think these are key for any massive change, whether it's addiction or otherwise.
This came about because I had a friend who was she was a few months sober and she was going to have a dinner party and she was trying to figure out whether or not to serve alcohol because in the past she always had, and these particular friends didn't know that she was trying to be sober and her husband still drank. She didn't want to like ruin the party, you know? So she was having all these mental gymnastics about like, oh, what do I do? And for some reason, when she was talking to me, I was a few months sober also at that point, and I knew what it took to make it last and to give it a shot. It was like, oh my God, you have to, you are literally saving your life. If you're trying to get sober, you're saving your life, no matter how bad your drinking is. If you think of it that way, and for me, I was like, where else are we not confused about their boundaries and priorities? It's like pregnancy. No one's wondering about how important it is to take care of a pregnant body and the choices that pregnant women make about how they're going to spend their time and who they're going to be with and what foods they're going to eat. And no one questions that. It's just like the person who's pregnant is clear. Everyone around them is clear. Great. What if we applied that to sobriety or any other big change that you're trying to make? So I came up with this pregnancy principle. So you can read the 4.
Number 1, you are building a new life.
That is the bottom line. That's what's true. You're building a new life, and a new life requires like a lot of care and attention and focus, right? So if you frame it as like, this is what's happening and this is how serious it is, your decisions become a lot clearer.
Thank you. Number 2, the new life you're building comes first, period.
Applied to, say, her dinner party, like the answer is very obvious. You don't serve alcohol. You just don't.
Number 3, anything or anyone that doesn't support the new life goes.
This is the hardest part for people, right? We want to hold on to all the things and places and people that we want to hold on to everything while also pulling away and changing, and we can't. So if her friends don't want to be at her house because she's not drinking anymore, then bye. It's how it has to be.
And then number 4, nothing trumps the process.
It takes 9 months, 10 months for a baby to form, right? It's a process. We can't control that process. We can only support it. And any change also is a process. We can't make it happen faster. We can't slow it down. We can only support what is happening. So the process is the process is the process. And your job is to stay in it, right? And to support it as best you can. You can't control it.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
So would you mind leading us in a short meditation of your calling?
Oh, sure. Go ahead and close your eyes, please, and take a deep breath. Just feel where you are in space and time, and draw your attention into your body from wherever it might be. There's this place inside of you. I call it the diamond in the center of your chest. And if you can take your right hand and just place it right there over your chest, over your physical heart, and feel yourself being breathed. You can feel the rhythm of your heart in your body beating into your hand. There is this part of you, this diamond in the center of your chest. That is perfect. And it's indestructible. It cannot be changed or ruined or tarnished by anything, or anyone. It is the truest part of who you are. It is your godlike nature or your Buddha nature. And it knows, it holds this vision for you of what is possible. It is life calling you forward. And more than anything, it wants you to glimpse its vision for you. You can just take a couple breaths into that space and maybe imagine a light there, sort of radiance. You can always return to this idea, this diamond in the center of your chest, this true nature. You can release your hand. And take another deep breath in. And exhale out your mouth. Open your eyes.
Woohoo! That was awesome.
Good.
Thank you so much, Laura. Oh my gosh.
I got you so deep in your meditation, I just forgot everything. You're so welcome.
But that's what we were talking about today, is rediscovering who we truly are, rediscovering the diamond on the inside. So on this beautiful note, where can people go to find your beautiful book and to find out more?
My book is sold anywhere books are sold. Certainly Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all that. It can be ordered there and almost any bookstore. All the information about me and my classes and the book and everything I do is on my website, which is my name, which is lauramckowen.com. I'm on social media. My favorite place is Instagram, so find me there.
Thank you so much for being here. I've got to let you go, but it has been a true honor and a joy.
Thank you. I really appreciate you. And I love that you have my book behind you. It's so nice. You're a great backdrop. You even match.
Thank you. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, we are the luckiest, just like you see it behind me, and begin discovering your surprising magic today and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Laura.
Yeah, you were great. I appreciate it.
I hope you had as beautiful of a heart-opening and enlightening look at addiction as I did with Laura McKowen. To check out more enlightening interviews, click here, subscribe below, and be sure to click on the bell icon to be notified of upcoming shows, premieres, and YouTube lives. If you're going through addiction or sobriety, be sure to share your story and comments below. Love you guys so much.